Hello and welcome to Conscious TV. My name is Renate McNay and my guest today is Anita Moorjani. Hello Anita, nice to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here.
Well, we are going to hear a remarkable story. Anita was diagnosed with cancer of the lymphatic system, Hodgkin's lymphoma. And her doctors gave her less than 36 hours to live. But instead of dying, she woke up to her true nature. It's incredible. And Anita wrote a book about her story, Dying to Be Me. This book, I received it 2 days ago, and I hear it will be available from March 5th. And I can assure you, if you start reading, you cannot put it down. It's just amazing. Okay, Anita, let's start by telling us a little bit about yourself. Who were you before you got cancer, before you were diagnosed?
Before I got diagnosed, I was somebody who was very, very fearful.
Yeah.
But I used to fear a broad spectrum of things. Everything from being disliked, not fitting in, not being good enough. I used to fear I was not spiritual enough. So I always felt I had to work hard at being better, at being more spiritual, at being liked. I also used to fear things like, for example, eating the wrong foods. I used to fear illness, fear cancer. I feared all the things that I believed caused cancer. So I used to eat a lot of healthy foods like, wheatgrass shots, supplements, lots of supplements I would take, and I was a vegan for a while. But I did all those things out of fear, not because of a love for life or a love for my body, but it was because I feared getting ill.
So who put this fear into your head in the first place? Where did that come from? How were you raised? Were you raised with a lot of fear?
I think the fears accumulated over time.
Mm-hmm.
My parents, they were very loving, but I think a lot of it is circumstantial because my parents are Hindu.
Yeah.
I grew up in a Hindu environment at home. I went to a British school, so where my classmates were all British.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Hong Kong, where the local people, the inhabitants, are mainly Chinese people.
Mm-hmm.
So I was exposed to a lot of different cultures. And even though my parents adored me, but very often I felt that I didn't live up to Hindu expectations, but I felt I didn't fit in anywhere. Like in school, I wasn't British, so I wasn't always accepted by the British kids. Generally out in Hong Kong, like being out in the streets, joining clubs, I felt I didn't fit in because I'm not Chinese. Mm-hmm. And then when I was exposed to other Indian people or Indian kids, or if my parents took me back to India, I didn't feel like I fit in there either because I'd lived abroad my whole life. I wasn't very Indian either. I didn't meet the expectations mm-hmm. of Indian people. So I felt that I was constantly working at trying to fit in or trying to belong or trying to be liked. That started from a very young age.
And were you aware then how unfree you were?
No, it's funny because it's all you know, so I wasn't aware at all.
Yes.
And it's only now looking back that I can see what it is, and now it's today that I know what to tell my 10-year-old self or my 15-year-old self. But at that time, I didn't know. I wasn't aware at all.
Right. And so you grew up in Hong Kong, and I think your father, was he still alive then, or was he already?
My father was alive until I was engaged to be married.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yes. He had always wanted me to have an arranged marriage.
Yes, I remember that was the thing, yeah.
Yes.
And you resisted.
I resisted. Yeah. I really resisted. And then I met my husband.
Yeah.
And interestingly, he was Indian. I told my parents that I won't get married to an Indian person, and be prepared, it's not going to be Indian. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, I met an Indian man, whose parents are from the same part of India as mine are. So that came as quite a surprise to both families, because my husband also, it turned out, we had so much in common. He also grew up in Hong Kong, also went to a British school, but not the same one as mine, so I didn't know him until we were adults. And we shared so much in common, where he also felt he didn't fit in anywhere.
Right.
So immediately we just clicked. We had so much to talk about.
Yes, yeah. And then there was the point where your very close friend was diagnosed with cancer.
Yes, my best friend, I'd known her for many years, since childhood, and when she was diagnosed with cancer, that came as an absolute shock to me. And that really made the fear more intense, because when I watched what she was going through, when I watched how she was deteriorating, and she was having the best treatment that money could buy. I mean, it was absolutely, her family stopped at nothing to put her in the best possible hospitals and give her the best treatment. It was the most advanced, most innovative treatment. And yet all I saw was that she was still deteriorating. She was just getting worse and worse. And it was very, very difficult. It started to get very difficult for me to see her, to watch her deteriorate. And it was during that time, I was going through a lot of fear around cancer, that it could happen to somebody my own age, someone who had so much to live for. And then one day I felt a lump on my collarbone, just here. And I went, first when I went to the doctor to have it checked out, what happened was that the doctor looked a little bit concerned, but she said that, let's hope it's just your body trying to fight off an infection. Let's hope it's just a swollen gland. So she gave me some medication, and she said, take this for a week, and if it doesn't go down in a week, then come back. And every day I was like willing it to go down, but it wasn't. It wasn't disappearing. So a week later, I went back to her and I said, it's still there and it's still the same. And so she sent me to another doctor, surgeon, for a biopsy. And after they did the biopsy, and then we went, my husband and I went to his office for the results, and he said that it was Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a form of cancer. And then what they do is they send you for the scan to see how much it's spread.
So in the moment the doctor said that to you, how did you feel?
Oh, I just felt it was a death sentence. The moment he said cancer, it was like I froze. It was like somebody had just handed me a death sentence, because during this time I was actually watching what was happening with my friend.
Yes, and then I think
and my husband's brother-in-law in the interim had also been diagnosed. Several months after my friend was diagnosed, my husband's brother-in-law was diagnosed with another aggressive form of cancer.
Right.
And so I was watching him as well. And so when I heard the word cancer for me, immediately I thought, oh, this is a death sentence. And in my mind, there was no other alternative as far as I was concerned, because that's what was happening around me.
So no other alternative than die?
Than dying. That's what I felt, because I could see both of these people getting, their bodies were deteriorating. My friend, all her hair had already fallen out, and she was really, she was looking very, very poorly. And as I would watch her, I just assumed that the same fate was in store for me.
Right.
And after I got diagnosed, it got harder and harder for me to look at them, especially my best friend, because she was someone I used to spend a lot of time with. So when I had the cancer, you know, I had a lot of trouble dealing with just watching her deteriorate the way she was. And I dealt with a lot of guilt at that time too. I was holding a lot of guilt about not spending as much time with her, because she was, of course, at that point much sicker than I was.
And I guess you also were somebody who liked to make other people happy.
Yes.
And please other people, and that was more important than pleasing yourself or your own happiness.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was always that sort of person. I was someone that was a real people pleaser.
Yeah.
And I used to always feel that I had to work hard to make other people like me, so I would go out of my way to please people, and I was always putting myself last, even if I was tired, even if I was exhausted, and somebody wanted something from me, I could never say no. I just never said no, and I would be giving, just giving and giving until I was drained.
Right.
So now, here I was dealing with my own cancer, and it was scaring me so much to see what my friend was going through, knowing that I had cancer, and it made me feel terrible not being with her. So it was like I was caught between
a rock. Hammer.
Yes, a double hammer, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
If I spent time with her, I felt awful and scared and fearful. If I didn't spend time with her, I was just full of guilt, completely and totally full of guilt, that I should be with her, I should be doing this for her. At this moment, she's sicker than me.
Yeah. So the next step was you were told you had cancer, and then you had to go for an MRI scan, I think, the following Monday.
That's right.
And what did the doctor say then?
After they called me back to get the results of the MRI scan, the doctor told me I had what they call a stage 2A, which means, like a stage 1 means it's local, it's just in that lymph node.
Right.
A stage 2 meant it spread to just the upper quadrant.
Yeah.
You know, a 3 would mean half your body, and a 4 would mean a full spread. So it was a stage 2A. So there's A and B, and those are the symptoms. A means you have no other symptoms yet, other than that. B means you have a lot of other symptoms, which for me started to come later, like night sweats, itching, low-grade fever. Those are what they call the B symptoms.
Right. And what was your take then to try? I think you wanted to try alternative medicine and not...
That's correct.
Radiation or chemotherapy?
Yes. So the doctor told me that the only option available to me was chemotherapy and radiation, and he said we would probably do a combination of the two. But I said, no, I don't want it, because I know it doesn't work. That's in my view. It doesn't work, because here I was watching two people who were getting worse, not better, from chemotherapy. And so I said that if chemo is supposed to cure you, then it would have cured them. So I'd rather take my chances.
Yeah, so you went to India and did Ayurvedic treatment?
Yes.
And it seemed to help?
It seemed to help, because I was in a completely different frame of mind. Now I was pulled out from that situation of having to deal with the cancer all around me. So I was pulled out of that, and having to deal with doctors and hospitals and my best friend. And I found that I had improved quite dramatically.
Right. And then you came back.
Yes.
And all the symptoms started to come back.
The symptoms all started to come back. Also, when my friend and my brother-in-law both passed away, you know, when my friend passed away, I was just shattered, absolutely. That really sent the fear riveting through me. And then, when my brother-in-law passed away as well, so that was very, very scary. And then a lot of people said to me, so have you gone to the doctor? Have you had chemotherapy? And I said no. And they would say that, oh, I think you should. And
are you crazy?
And are you crazy? Exactly. Are you crazy? You've got cancer and you're not treating it?
And so the doubts.
And the doubts started eating away at me, and the fears.
Yes.
And yeah, there was a lot of fear, doubt.
You became insecure.
Very.
You didn't know what to do.
Yes. And so I started to get weaker. I started to get very, very fearful, very.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I started to get weaker. My body started to deteriorate. And I would go to doctors. I would go to my doctor generally for a checkup, like say for a scan, and also my doctor suggested a blood transfusion because my level of iron was dropping.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time I was refusing the chemotherapy, but he was doing everything else for me.
Mm-hmm.
I started to get fluid in my lungs, and so he would drain the fluid. So he was doing everything else except the chemotherapy.
Right.
I was in so much fear that my health just continued to deteriorate.
And it did.
And it did. It did. And so in December, so I was originally diagnosed in April of 2002.
Yes.
So by December of 2005, I went to the doctor and he did a scan, a full body scan, and he told my husband that I had 3 months to live at best. Mm-hmm. He said that's like the maximum.
Were you already bound at the wheelchair then? I think you were at the wheelchair, you had oxygen.
I had oxygen, and
right.
I had open skin lesions. Yes. Because the toxins were coming out of my body right. through the skin lesions.
Yes.
And I had a low-grade fever all the time.
Right.
Just a running low-grade fever. I had fluid in my lungs. I could never lie flat. I had to sort of be a little bit tilted upright.
Right.
If I lied flat, I would start choking.
Yes.
And I was getting all what they call the B symptoms, like the night sweats, and my skin was always very, very itchy. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even last the 3 months that the doctor said. So the doctor said that I have 3 months at the most.
How was that for you?
Now,
3 months.
Oh, in fact, they didn't tell me.
Oh, they didn't tell you?
Yeah, the doctor told my husband, and my husband didn't tell me.
All right.
So he wouldn't tell me, and he stopped going to work. He'd already pretty much stopped going to work long before that, and he was absolutely amazing. He was just there by my side and caring for me.
And you also had a full-time nurse, I think.
We had a nurse that would come in all day, every day,
right.
and she would leave about 10 p.m. at night.
Yeah. So you couldn't do anything anymore for yourself?
No, and my mother was there as well.
Right.
So, and I'd lost my appetite. I wasn't really eating anymore. So I'd lost a lot of weight. My arms and legs, my limbs were like skeletal. They were really skinny. And so I had, the nurse was there to administer things, like she was administering painkillers and things like that.
Were you in pain?
I was in a lot of pain at that time.
Right.
I was in a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort.
So why? I thought lymphatic system, the cancer is not painful, but
it was because now the skin lesions had opened up, so they were oozing, and so they had to be bandaged all the time.
Right.
The fact that I couldn't lie down was very uncomfortable.
Sure.
I would call it more discomfort than pain.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of discomfort. You know, I couldn't sit in a position. My lungs were filled with fluid, and it was heavy. The lungs felt heavy, and I was very weak, very, very weak, and my head felt heavy. My neck didn't even have the strength to hold my head up, so my head was down like this the whole time.
Wow.
So I was in a tremendous amount of discomfort. I had oxygen, you know, so I was breathing with an oxygen tank. And I would find myself choking and coughing, and I would be very tired, and I'd want to lie down, and I'd start to lie down, and then I'd start choking, and I would have to sit back up again.
Right.
So it was very, very uncomfortable. And of course I couldn't go out anymore.
Yeah.
I'd stopped going out for a long time because even when I was able to go out, as soon as I started looking really ill, people treated me differently, and people look at you, and I started to feel very uncomfortable. And so I stopped going out, even in the wheelchair.
Right.
I stopped going out.
And there was one evening, I think the nurse gave you morphine. And what happened then?
So on that evening, I really wanted to just go to sleep. So I told the nurse, could you give me like a stronger shot of morphine so I can really get some sleep.
Right.
So she did. She gave me a strong shot of morphine, and then she went off for the night.
Yeah.
And I went to sleep. And even then, even though I was sleeping, I wasn't lying flat. I was just a little bit propped up with pillows.
Yeah.
And then in the morning, I didn't wake up.
Yeah. My
eyes were closed. And my husband, I mean, he woke up, and then he was waiting for me to get up. And then by 9 o'clock, my eyes hadn't opened, and I hadn't woken up, and he was shaking me to wake up. And then he started to notice, like when he moved the blanket, he noticed that my arms and legs were swollen, very, very swollen up. And so he started to panic, and he called the doctor right away. And the doctor said, the doctor knew immediately what was wrong. He knew right away that those are the symptoms of the organs failing, that I was suffering from organ failure. Now this was the end of it. But the doctor didn't tell him that over the phone. The doctor said, just bring her to the hospital right now. He said, I'm going to arrange it right now. And he told my husband which hospital. I'd never been in this hospital before because I'd just been going to the local clinic until then. So he just told my husband, bring her to this particular hospital right now. And so I was rushed to the hospital, and the doctor was already there. He had already called the oncologist on duty to say that I was coming in. And when I was admitted, as soon as I arrived, I was in a gurney and wheeled into the hospital. The oncologist took one look at me and said to my husband that it's too late. I cannot save this lady. Her organs have shut down. And she said that immediately by looking at my limbs, by looking at the open skin lesions. So they immediately hooked me up to their oxygen tank and everything. And my mother was with me as well. She had come from India to care for me. So it was my mother, my husband, the doctor, now the oncologist, and the hospital people. And then they wanted to do a PET scan, like a full body scan there at the hospital. They said, we need to do a scan just to see how bad it is. And even though they had the scans from my doctor, those scans were from 6 weeks ago, they wanted one now. Now, they found that every time they put me to lie flat and go into the machine, I started to choke. So every 30 seconds, they had to pull me out again. And basically, I mean, till today, I, of course, have the report taken on that day, which shows that I had tumors, like huge tumors the size of lemons, from the base of my skull all the way down under my arms, my chest, my abdomen, all the way down to below my abdomen, all through my lymphatic system.
Wow. Yes. And I know now something really exciting is happening. You were lying there, and the doctor actually said to your husband.
Yes. The doctor took my husband aside and said basically that these were my final hours.
Yeah.
And then she called another oncologist because she actually said that I don't usually deal with patients at this critical stage because we know that these are her final hours. So she called another oncologist, a more senior one, who arrived a little while later. And they basically told my husband and my mum that these were my final hours. Now, even though I was in a coma, I was aware of everything that was going on around me. I was aware of every conversation they were having, everything they were feeling, everything they were saying. I was just completely aware of everything, and I felt incredible.
Well, I think that's how your book starts, with the sentence, wow, I feel so free, so great.
Yes, that's exactly.
So what happened? So you heard the doctor and your husband talking on the other end, from the corridor, you understood everything they were saying?
Yes.
Did you see them?
I saw them.
Yeah.
When I say I saw them, it's very interesting how it is. Because I wasn't limited to a physical body,
Yeah.
so I'm not seeing them through physical eyes, but it's more like I became aware of them. It's almost like energetically I can feel everything they're feeling. I can hear and I can see them. I'm so aware of them.
Mm-hmm.
I knew the distress they were feeling.
Mm-hmm.
My husband, my mother, they were really, really distressed, and I wanted to help them. I wanted.
You still wanted to comfort them.
Yeah, I wanted them to know that I'm okay, I'm free, I feel great.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I felt amazing. I felt like I was, as though I was encompassed by, I can only call it unconditional love, but even that word is so limited.
Yes.
But it felt like for the first time in my life, I felt like I was loved unconditionally, but that I didn't have to prove myself anymore. For the first time, it was like I let go. I was relaxed. I felt I didn't have to work at being more lovable or being liked or being more spiritual. It was like I was loved regardless. It was like I was just bathed in this energy, this amazing, loving, magnificent energy.
And you also described that you felt at one with everybody and everything.
I did. I felt connected, as though at our consciousness level we're all one, we're all connected.
And
so
that was actually your experience.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. I felt like as though I merged with my husband, but even with the doctor, the nurse, my mother. And then I was aware of things that were seemingly miles away, but to me nothing was far away, because it was like I was connected to everything. I sensed my brother, who was actually in India, rushing to get on a plane to come and see me. But I sensed his, you know, that he was frantic to get to me on time.
Yeah. So you didn't actually see them. It was more a sensing, or can you describe?
Yes.
As close. I know you try to translate something into words, which can only be an experience.
Yes. I saw them, like I saw my brother on the plane coming to see me.
Yeah.
Yet, at the same time, I used the word saw loosely, because I wasn't seeing with eyes. When you see with eyes, you're focused from one point.
Yes, yes.
And so from one point, it's wherever my vision can reach. But without eyes, without a physical body, without physical limitations, it was like I spilled out and spread and just expanded and expanded, and I encompassed it.
Well, could you say that awareness was seeing, awareness did the looking?
Yes, but it was total awareness.
Yes.
And I could see everything.
Yes.
But I could see everything at the same time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't limited by distance, and it wasn't limited by time either. So it's like 360-degree peripheral vision, but at the same time, it felt as if everything was happening at once. It's not linear, like sequential, like the way when you're in the physical body.
Yes.
I think maybe our minds interpret time as being linear, but when we're not expressing through the minds, and when we are just pure awareness or pure consciousness, it was like there's no linear time. Everything is happening all at once, all at the same time.
And when you looked at your body, was there anything going on
I felt no attachment to my body at all, and because I was feeling so amazing and so magnificent and expanded, like huge and powerful, my body just looked really small and weak and limp and lifeless, just lying there. It was insignificant, and there's this feeling of, how can that little insignificant thing house this, what I feel now?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
Exactly.
But did you find an answer?
Well, slowly the understanding started to come. And this is the part that's quite hard to explain, simply because because time is not linear. So I felt as though that over there everything was happening at the same time. So now, coming back, I have to figure out how to explain it in a sequence that makes sense.
Yes.
Yes. Excuse me one moment.
Yeah.
So I'm sometimes I struggle to make it all make sense sequentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in that realm, it was as though I encountered my father, because it was as though I became his essence. I understood him. I encountered my best friend. I also sensed that my brother and I had some kind of a link from another life, and I sensed my husband and I had some kind of a purpose that is linked to us being together. But here in this life, like even when I'm writing the book, I have to make it make sense to the reader and put it in some kind of sequential order. But in actuality, it was as though all of this was happening at the same time.
Yeah. So when you say another life, this is not like 100 or 200 or 500 years ago. It is happening right now.
It is happening right now. So I could normally interpret it as my brother and I shared a previous life together, but it didn't feel, in that realm, it didn't feel that the life I could see was previous. It felt like it was happening right here and right now.
Yeah.
Just like in one life right now, I'm lying on a hospital bed. My brother is on a plane coming to see me. My mum and my husband are around me, waiting for me to take my last breath.
Yeah.
In another life, I'm with my brother in another scene, where in that life he's my younger brother, whereas currently he's my older brother. And it was happening as real as this one.
Yes.
So it didn't feel like it was a past life. It's as though everything, even what we call past lives, are actually running simultaneously. They're parallel.
Right. Yes.
That's what it felt like in that realm.
Yeah. And you also mentioned that when you felt emotions coming towards you, you were drawn away.
Yes.
Can you explain that?
Yes. Every time I felt like I would watch the scene unfolding of my husband getting very emotional because I was dying and the doctors saying that I was not going to make it, and my mother was very emotional, I would start to feel for them. I would start to feel emotional and I would start to get drawn in. But as soon as I would start to get emotionally drawn in, I felt, and it wasn't me consciously doing it, but I felt as though I was then being pulled back. And then an awareness would come in that it's all perfect in the grander scheme, and then I would feel myself getting detached. And then there was like a knowing, like a knowledge that in the bigger picture, in the grander scheme, everything is okay, no matter what happens. Even if my body dies, it's still okay. And it could be because in the greater tapestry there are other lives, you know, like I was seeing the other life. So in this particular life, even if my body died, it's still okay. And I seem to understand that the essence of who I am never truly dies. And whatever the outcome in this scene, it's still okay, it's still perfect.
No matter how it looks like?
No matter how it looks like. So it's like the further you step back, the more you can see the order and the grander scheme, and it's still okay.
Right.
And even though I understood that my husband's life is inextricably linked to mine, I seem to understand that if I died, he would probably follow me soon after. But I also realized that even that is okay. Even in the grander scheme of things, that's okay.
So how long were you in this place?
About 30 hours.
30 hours?
Yes.
Yeah,
so it was halfway through the next day that I came out of it.
Yes. And there was the point where you felt you could make a decision to come back into your life,
Yes.
into your body, or not?
Yes, there
Yeah.
was absolutely a point. So I started to become aware of my father and my best friend. It was so
Which was
wonderful.
the woman who died on cancer earlier.
Exactly.
Yeah, Sonia, I think, was her name.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful connecting with her because I felt like a cathartic release of all the guilt that I had carried with me. And all I felt from her was unconditional love. And so that was really beautiful. And then my father, who I'd always felt I'd let him down because I hadn't got married while he was alive, and he had always wanted me to have an arranged marriage. All I felt from him was unconditional love. And I understood that these cultural restrictions and these cultural expectations, they're just part of our physical illusion. In the other realm, they don't exist. The only thing that existed was our unconditional love for each other.
Yeah.
And
you also saw why you had cancer.
And I understood exactly why I had the cancer. I started to understand that because I had always been so fearful, and I had always put myself last, and I was always so drained, and also because I understood how amazingly magnificent we actually are. We are really amazing, magnificent human beings, but in a body, I didn't realize it. I was so caught up in the limitations, in my feeling the need to always prove myself or to work hard at being loved. I never realized that actually we are amazing, magnificent, powerful human beings expressing through these little bodies. And I realized that it was because of that, because I'd always forsaken myself and always put myself last. And over the years, all my fears, the fears had become pathological. It had manifested itself as cancer.
Do you think all our illnesses have to do with denying ourselves, not treating us well?
I suspect a lot of them do, a lot do. And I know I have said this before, when people feel, what about young children or babies or pets? I feel that children and our pets are very sensitive to the energies around them and the emotions of the people around them. So I do feel it is to do with it's not our fault, but it's not our fault at all. But it's to do with how we feel about ourselves. We beat ourselves up. We wear ourselves down. We tear ourselves down. I feel that the environment in terms of food and toxins is secondary to that. I really do, because you have people you can have two people that live in the same environment, exposed to the same toxins, but one will get sick and the other won't.
Right.
So even though whether we blame our mobile phones or pollution or whatever, you have people who use mobile phones and live in polluted cities their entire lives. So I do believe that how much we challenge ourselves, forsake ourselves, put ourselves down, beat ourselves up, I do believe that really wears down, not only at our immune system, because first of all it does that, but at our very identity, our very reason for living. It wears down, it makes us feel purposeless, and I feel that that has a lot to do with it.
Yes, I think one of the big messages you brought back from out there, the other realms, is never, never deny yourself. Be always yourself, never feel guilty, and so forth. But you know, it is not so easy to know how to be yourself with all the conditionings we have and all the beliefs and fear and so forth. How do you know how to be yourself?
It's actually, on the one hand, yes, we've been conditioned a lot, and a lot of us have moved very far away from who we are. But it's actually very, very simple. All we have to do is get in touch with our feelings. That's all. So it's not about what should I do or will this please the other person, but it's about how do I feel about this? How does it make me feel to do this? So we have to start asking ourselves different questions. That's how I look at it. So now, whenever I'm faced with choices, previously it used to be which choice will please the most people. Now it's which choice will please me, which one makes me feel better or happier or more joyful. It's really about finding the joy in life again.
But then we do have to do sometimes things we don't like to do. We cannot only do what we love to do. There are certain things we just have to do.
But it depends on the reason why we're doing it. When we do things that we have to do, are we doing it because we feel we need to prove ourselves? Or are we doing it because we want other people to like us? Both of which I don't do things for those reasons anymore. Or are we doing it because we need to do it to make our lives more comfortable, you know, need to go out and work, or because we're doing it for someone we love, even though we don't like what we're doing. We're doing it really because we love them, and so we want to do it. Not because we want them to like us or we want to be liked. So, yes, there are things that we don't want to do, but what are the reasons we're doing it? So basically it's really getting in there and start asking yourself, why do I do all these things that I do? Why do I feel drained all the time? Who am I doing it for?
That's true. So let's go back and finish your story. So you decide to come back, you open your eyes.
Yes, actually my father said to me on the other side, he made me aware that I had the choice, that it was not my time, and I had the choice of whether to come back or not. And at first I didn't want to come back, not to mention that it was amazing on that side, you know, the amazing love and everything I was feeling, but also the fact that my body was so sick and ridden with cancer. I knew that it would not only not serve me to come back, but it wasn't going to serve anyone else for me to come back in that body. But then the next thing I seemed to understand was that now that I knew the truth of who I really am, that if I chose to come back and express myself in this body again, the cancer would disappear. I just seemed to know that it was my choice. If I came back, the cancer would disappear, because now I knew the truth of who I am and what I was supposed to express. And then I reached a point where I felt that I couldn't go any further. It was my father. You know, it's interesting because there's no language, you don't speak, it's like you just understand.
There's a knowledge.
There's just the knowledge, and it was like I felt these emotions from my father. And what he was saying to me was, this is as far as you can go. Basically, if I went any further, I would be severing the ties.
You cut off the lifeline.
Yes, and then I felt that both my father and my best friend were saying to me, now go back and live your life fearlessly.
So it's like they functioned as a guidance for you?
Yes, they did. They did, and so then they told me that this was as far as I can go. And now I can go back and live my life fearlessly. And those are the words I carry with me all the time. Go back and live your life fearlessly.
And I think you came back, and within 4 days, all the cancer disappeared.
Within 4 days, about 70% of the tumors had gone. They couldn't even, they couldn't find them to the touch. Now, I was still very, very weak. But over the days, they started to do the biopsies, and they started to take the scans, and they couldn't find a trace of cancer. They just, every test they did, they couldn't find a trace of cancer.
What did they think about it?
They didn't know what to make of it.
Did they say, oh, we must have done a wrong diagnosis?
Yes.
That's what they normally say.
Yes, that's exactly what they said. And it's very interesting because over the 3.5, almost 4 years that I had the cancer,
Yeah.
I've had so many tests, and all of them have said that you've got to take the chemo, you're crazy if you don't, and it's spreading. And then after it disappears, the first thing I hear is, oh, it might have been a misdiagnosis.
Yeah, amazing. So so how do you integrate your experience into this life? I guess there were certain things probably which completely shifted in your mind.
Oh, completely. Yes, absolutely.
And certain things you have to somehow remind yourself.
Yes. I look at life completely differently now, very, very differently. I think, first of all, I think that the way we're brought up, what we're brought up to believe, we are brought up to be fearful, very, very fearful. Everything we do, everything we look at from the perspective of fear, whether it's the way we look at our health, so basically our medical system, whether it's our government, our legal system, everything. We are basically a pathologically fearful society, all of us.
But you're right, and yet how can we let go of this fear? They are so in our cell memories. I mean, you had the grace happening that you were catapulted out of it. But a normal person who is ridden with fear, do you have any suggestion?
What I would say to anybody who's ridden with fear is start inwardly, like start getting in touch with your feelings.
Right.
That is the truest place of yourself. Start getting in touch with your joy. I would also suggest to start finding things that make you happy. We have become also a society and a culture that takes life too seriously. We fear everything, where we take, even spirituality, we take it too seriously.
Yes.
We've forgotten to laugh. So a good place to start would be by finding things that make you laugh and that make you feel joyful. And moving on from there, getting in touch with your feelings rather than constantly living from your mind about, because the questions that come from our mind are very different from the questions that come from our heart.
Yes.
They're very, very different. Our mind always comes up with questions that make us want to look good or be better than everyone else. Our heart is only interested in feeling joy. That's all.
It's true, yeah. Was there something you found really difficult coming back into this world? What was the most difficult thing for you to adjust to?
Integrating back with people, people that were, let's say, from my past, because I had a completely different view of reality after my experience.
Yeah.
I wasn't afraid of the same things. I didn't look at health in the same way. I don't relate to it anymore. You know, people who are focused on illness rather than on health. I don't relate to things like Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And why do you want to be aware of breast cancer? Why can't we just be aware of health?
Yeah.
I don't relate to any of that anymore, because there's so much now, even on TV, all the time about becoming more aware of cancer. We're forced to become more aware of cancer. That's the worst thing we can do. If we put the same amount of effort and energy on becoming aware of being healthy, we would be a much healthier society.
Yeah, you see, our society is addicted to drama.
Yes.
Yeah. If you watch the news, that's the only thing you hear, drama.
Yes, exactly.
And the same with papers. You're completely right in what you say.
Yes.
And I hope a lot of people hear this message.
Thank you. My only intention is really just to help people, because I feel that it is our fears and the way that we look at life that has caused us to become so addicted to, as you say, to drama, and has made us It's made us more vulnerable to illnesses such as cancer, heart disease, diabetes. I feel that it's our lifestyle, but not just in terms of what we eat, but it's also how fearful we are, how stressed out we are, and how little respect we have for our own self.
Yes, yes, that's right. Well, Anita, what a beautiful story and message. And we have about 1 minute. Is there anything you want to share with us in this last minute?
Yes, the only thing I would say is I wish that each and every single person on the planet knew how magnificent they really are. I really wish that. If every single person knew it, I think that our rate of illness, cancer would go down, our crime rate would go down, violence would go down. All we have to do is just realize our own magnificence. That's all.
Well, a big task. Okay, Anita, well, thank you for coming to us and sharing your story. I just show your book again. It's Anita Moorjani. Moorjani?
Moorjani.
Yes.
You
Dying
said
to
very
be
well.
Me. My journey from cancer to near death to true healing. A wonderful read, and thank you for watching Conscious TV. Goodbye.